All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Dave here, talking real music in real time for real people just like you and just like me. I was thinking about Kenny Loggins, which I don't know if I've ever done a video about Kenny Loggins, but Kenny Loggins is not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's just what? And neither is his former band that he was in with Jim Messina called Loggins and Messina, who put out a whole bunch of great material during the 1970s, much of which has been focus tested off of radio, except like Danny's song and maybe Your Mama Don't Dance, and that's about it. You know, Poison gave that song a good run for its money, but nothing beats the original as far as I can, say, and I'm saying it. It's just, but it's mind blowing. Kenny Loggins has this amazing body of work, and he kept the 1980s going. You know what I'm saying? And if you like movie soundtracks during the 1980s, whether it was Top Gun, right? The Danger Zone. I mean, come on. Just some of these songs are so iconic. And yet here we are in the year 2022, and bands like A Tribe Called Quest and MC5 are being considered for the Hall of Fame. The band Kraftwerk got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Kraftwerk, okay? I listened to a little bit of Kraftwerk in the 80s while I was doing the college radio scene. An interesting band with a lot of weird sounds, but absolutely no mainstream popularity, no mainstream success whatsoever, no radio singles, not one. Okay. And I think there needs to be a balance between sort of the obscure and avant-garde, as they like to say, and the popular. I think there needs to be a bit of both if you're going to nominate someone like that. We've got Kate Bush again, and not that I don't think Kate Bush is an interesting nominee, and I do believe she's talented, but we are omitting so much of the great music. It's almost like what people like isn't what the Hall of Fame likes, and there's this great tension there. Now, again, Carly Simon is nominated this year. Praise the Lord for that, right? I mean, her ex-husband has been in the Hall of Fame for quite some time, and some might consider that to be sexism, because I believe both of those artists are on the same playing field, the same footing musically. And, James Taylor probably has a deeper catalog and more success, but to omit Carly really looks stupid. It just does. And a lot of these artists are getting kind of long in the tooth. Kenny Loggins is 74 years old, and he's yet to be nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. If you want to just put Messina in there too, you do the Loggins and Messina nomination, and I think that's fair. Jim Messina helped found one of the most influential bands, Poco, and Poco is not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. You can do this all day long. I don't understand. Is it the fact that they don't like contemporary music at the Hall of Fame? I hear all the time these writers, when they write articles now, they're like, oh, this guy is just a yacht rock artist. He's a yacht rocker. Okay, that's called really good, listenable contemporary music that doesn't make your ears bleed. That's really good songwriting. That's what Loggins and Messina were all about. Some of their album cuts or epic stuff that you didn't hear on the radio when it came out, maybe actually did, because we had an FM album format that was very robust, especially in the 1970s. And you could be driving down the road and, hey, this isn't the single off the album, but Joe DJ here thinks this is good for your ears, so here you go. I haven't heard the song Angry Eyes on the radio in, I don't know, 20, 30. I don't know the last time I heard it, because the song defies a lot of formats. It's too long to put on a contemporary station. It's kind of a rockin' song, but it's not over the top rocking. It's kind of, again, good enough for the boat, right? It's part of that whole genre now, which I think is good and bad because a lot of people don't respect it. And I think the Hall of Fame doesn't respect it. I mean, you could put Carly Simon in that genre. You could put Carole King, who just got into the Hall of Fame, in that genre to some degree. I don't know why people can't just accept good music and not go, oh, you know, this is just light rock for people who, you know, have very large boats. And that's hardly true. It could be great music for people who have great stereo systems, right? Who have old school stereo systems that actually produce really good sound. And Kenny Loggins and Jim Messina, they should be tops on that list of good things to listen to on your really good stereo. But I don't know, either you need to break some kind of weird rule. You need to be like spasmatic like MC5, or you need to be nerdy, quirky computer geeks like Kraftwerk, or guys who wear plant pots on their head like Devo, right? Devo's been nominated, and even Devo finds it kind of strange, although they're really strange, but they find it strange that they're nominated. I've read a couple of articles, and I think the leader of Devo said that somebody over there must really like us, meaning the Hall of Fame. I don't get it. When you look at influence and impact, Devo was a flash in the pan, and it's not like all these artists in the 90s were influenced by Devo. I don't know anything really influenced by Devo. Devo was a new wave band, and new wave was a short-lived but interesting part of rock and roll, and it did influence a lot of people to change their sound to some degree to accommodate that trend, but that trend came and went very quickly. Whereas the 1970s was an entire decade of singer-songwriter music. You had disco come along, and it wasn't like these artists, all of them just went disco. Some of them may have added some rhythm or some beats to some of their music to make it more palatable for the disco crowd. But again, that was actually kind of short-lived too. It really, I think, impacted where music went into the 80s, because you had dance music that was influenced by disco music and so forth. But if you're talking about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame here, and we are, you look at Loggins and Messina, you look at Poco, that's where Jim Messina basically started, Buffalo Springfield, that whole era where you had all of these great musicians. And that was the beginning of something really special. And Kenny Loggins on his own, and that's what this is really about, ended up being the soundtrack of the 1980s for a lot of people. And his music, by the way, is still on the radio quite a bit. Footloose and Danger Zone, and, you know, I'm All Right, which I think kicked the decade off with the whole Caddyshack thing, which was epic. And people have great memories of this stuff too, because they connect the song to the movie. And, you know, you have these huge #1 songs, you're nominated for Grammys, and yet you're not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Why? It's not rock and roll enough? I mean, is A Tribe Called Quest rock and roll enough for the Hall of Fame? There's so many contradictions, and people say, Dave, just leave it alone. This is just a screwed up institution. We need another. I do believe we need another institution. The American Music Hall of Fame, something else. We need something to honor all of these people who aren't in. The problem is you've got these institutions in place, right? And this one institution is really obstinate. It's really recalcitrant. They don't want to put certain things into it. They don't even want to nominate certain things. I don't think Kenny Loggins has ever been nominated for the Hall of Fame. I don't think Loggins and Messina has ever been nominated. I mean, we can go down that list. Foreigner hasn't been nominated. Styx hasn't been nominated. REO Speedwagon hasn't been nominated. But I'm focused on Kenny Loggins because he had this amazing career for 2 decades with and without Jim Messina. And either way, he should be put in. I would put him in with Jim Messina because Jim Messina deserves to get in too, because he's a rock legend and he's unheralded and he's a great musician. And it just makes sense for 2 big, very huge names coming out of the 60s and 70s and into the 80s that you need to cross them off the list and get them in. It's just, you're wasting a lot of time by focusing on these bands that a lot of people just scratch their head and go, that's not even Eminem. I mean, why Eminem? Look, I understand this has something to do with all this time that has elapsed. And somebody like me who has their foot back into even into the 1970s, even though 80s I was more self-aware, but in the 70s, there was all this music that was on the radio, and a lot of it is being forgotten about, and a lot of it isn't being honored by the people that need to honor it. For you Steve Perry fans, don't fight it. Kenny Loggins and Steve Perry. What a collaboration, right? Do you hear that song on the radio? Nope. You don't. I mean, the music industry, again, this could be one of those videos I do, the war on Kenny Loggins, right? And I might put it in there that way, but the problem is they do play Kenny Loggins a lot on the radio because they know his music is very accessible and people have good memories. And he was a really strong songwriter. And if he didn't write his own stuff, he was, singing like a David Foster song or something. He was just really intuitive that way. And he was a great, and still is, a great vocalist as well, a great arranger, and should be in the Hall of Fame. So, I mean, there's not much else I can say. I just wanted to acknowledge the great work of Kenny Loggins. I don't think I've done a video on Kenny Loggins before. I may have done one, but it's just a huge tragedy. He's too popular to be in the Hall of Fame. He was too accessible. He, used too much cheesy technology during the 1980s to make his songs sound all glossy and overproduced. Okay, that's your argument. I mean, all those chart-topping songs, all of those great album cuts. I mean, he had a ton of songs in the 80s and in the 70s with Loggins and Messina, and he should be considered either as a solo artist or as a duo with Messina. I'd like to see Loggins and Messina get in because I think it's fitting because both of those guys have earned it. And as a classic duo, people might start to, dig up their old Loggins and Messina records and realize that, it's not just about one song. See, back in those days, guys would make albums, artists would make albums that, had more than 1 or 2 good songs on them. And FM radio stations, they used to play a lot of other songs other than the singles. That's why I see these guys on YouTube doing these videos and I complain about it. And I don't call anybody out by name, but there's one guy in particular who's like, hey, how come this song wasn't a hit? And he does a whole video and he gets like 1 million views on it. And I'm thinking to myself, I lived through that era and that song was on the radio. You just weren't there to hear it, or you were in diapers or something. I was there to hear it. And there were other formats other than, having a little book that you purchased online that documents all the Billboard singles. I mean, radio was so much better in the 70s when DJs actually were able to, lobby their program directors, their music directors, and say, hey, I was in the production studio and you got to hear this song. Whether the record label was promoting it or not, it's one of the things I love to do. And sometimes I got overruled, but a lot of times it was like, okay, we can play that. We can put that in light rotation or something. And then we'll let the audience decide whether they like it or not, because people used to call the station and you'd have to pick up the phone and people would say, hey, what are you playing right now? That's, democracy, radio democracy. Now we've just got oligarchy on the radio, which is fitting because that's our form of government currently all around the world. See how I worked politics into that? But hey, it's the truth. So if I had my own radio station, it'd be an FM album rock station playing all this music you used to hear on the radio. And it would be kind of a smooth format. It wouldn't be a make your ears bleed format. It would be stuff that you could listen to all the time. And there'd be so much variety that you'd never get sick of it. And I think I would be successful with it. But, I need investors. I need somebody with deep pockets to come along and buy a terrestrial radio station. But that's not going to happen because they're all owned by big corporations. You can find good music online. There's this one radio station I listen to called Left Coast 70s. Left Coast 70s. You don't need a yacht, right? You don't need a big boat to listen to it. You can put it on. It's part of the Soma FM radio family. And it's mind-blowing. It's all this music from the 1970s all mixed together. And it's just off the beaten track. And you can listen to it for a long period of time. But a lot of us just want to hear the same old songs over and over again. We're hooked to that format. We're hooked to the corporate way. And the corporate way, easy for me to say, is getting rather boring and tedious. So anyway, Kenny Loggins, Jim Messina, they're not in the Hall of Fame. Legends, great musicians, and they seem to be pretty decent guys too, which is important to me. But I don't understand why they're not in the Hall of Fame, but I don't understand a lot about the Hall of Fame. And the more I complain, I guess the less it matters to the people at the Hall of Fame. They've got their own agenda, and each year they just completely botch the people that should be nominated. They'll nominate one or two good ones, and then I'm thinking to myself, where is everybody else? You need to get everybody in, and then you can do your weird experiments once you get everybody in. All right, people, that's the video. Sorry, I just went off on a tangent, but that's what I do. Thanks for watching the channel. Thanks for subscribing to the channel. And don't forget about Patreon if you want to support what I do here. It's $1 a month or $2 a month or whatever you can afford. If you want to do $1,000 a month, say you got into some money and you want... I'm kidding. But, if a big investor wanted to come along and do a radio station, I think that would be even more interesting. And I'd love to be the music director, the program director. That would be a fun job. I'd program that sucker. I'd throw my voice out there and it would be automated, but I'd be putting new songs in all the time and it would just be like the old days. It'd be fun. So that's my video. Thanks for watching and I will see you soon.